Hey, this is Mo Lunsford at Union Grove Lumber Studios.
And this is The Shed Geek. We want to welcome you to today's episode.
Thank you for listening to part 2 of a 2-part series here at the Shed Geek Podcast. If you missed part 1, just go back to last week and listen for more engaging conversation here at the Shed Geek Podcast.
But in general, do you see a lot of benefit of being in rent-to-own now? Like with the competition scaling the way it is, the price of money, all the things, it's profitable, but how many people want to be in it? I'm just curious. Is there other areas that you can look at? I mean, we've been every bit as successful with our marketing as we have our rent-to-own. That's not to suggest our rent-to-own isn't doing good. Folks I partnered with are in business for 13 years. We just had the best year ever in year 14 through our partnership. It's good, but man, there's so much area in others. For us right now, we're attacking marketing and traditional financing. There's other areas that we're looking at to be able to provide a service. Again, you can't stop me from helping people. If that's providing a service, then we'll provide a service.
Marketing was built successfully around, it was established as an ROI. The return on investment was clearly defined as the measuring stick. When I got in the industry in 17, 18, I used to go to these meetings and I would hear people go, oh yeah, I'm making 50% of my rent-to-own portfolio. Oh, no, you're not. You don't know how to do the math. Then a few years later, I'm making 30% of my rent-to-own. No, you're not. You still don't know how to do your math. When you actually break down the true cost of it and you start looking at it going, it wasn't nearly as profitable as people thought it was. And a bunch of people, I can remember people borrowing money as dealers to invest with rent-to-own companies to try to make yields on it because they thought the yields would be so huge. And I'm not saying the yields on rent-to-own aren't great and it's not better than any installment loan package I've ever seen.
How you manage it.
But when you have a cost of funds that is nothing, to 4%, and then a cost of funds that goes from 4 to 7, or it goes from 4 to 9, or it goes to 4 to 11.
How much yield's left?
How much yield is left. So now you start talking about net, now you're paying 5-6% dealer premiums on your rent-to-own.
Minimum.
Some
are doing more.
And you're sitting there going, okay, well now I got these dealer premiums that are biting into my yield, and they're paid up front, so I actually have losses on that if I'm not careful as a rent-to-own company. The question is people, I think, just became more granular in their math. The environment changed around the premium piece. The environment changed around the repo piece. The big environment change is we all went from single-digit true losses, early term fraud, to now a lot of lenders are experiencing 7, 8, 9, 10, 12% fraud, meaning the building doesn't exist. So now I'm not getting it back at 70 or 50 or 30 cents on the dollar. I'm getting nothing back. So I have 100% loss on a portfolio tranche.
And some of that's organized fraud.
Yeah, that is 6-7 times bigger than it was even 3 years ago. So now you've got another inclement math piece factoring into that ROI. So is rent-to-own as profitable or as appealing as it used to be? It's just mathematically not anymore. Because even if you have free liquid cash to do your own rent-to-own, I can get you a money market account making you 6% right now. So risk to reward. You start going, how do I look at it? And that's what, has really hurt. We started on inventory funding and we started on all these other things. And we're going, the cost versus the benefit, the amount of money you had to weigh out. All of those things have kind of changed the landscape a little bit. And it's a lot of what, me and my partner spend time talking about. Me and George go, at scale, and we're not giant, but we're good size already. And it's like, we're having to manage to a scope of things. But that naturally leads you back, coming full circle to, I want to either have huge influence or absolute control on as many of the components as I can to make sure that my personal company's best opportunity is maximized. And that's leading people to strain relationships and everything because everybody wants to control more of what they have. because it's becoming more expensive to do everything. Transportation's more expensive, selling is more expensive. Dear Lord, I can remember everybody go, I could rent a lot for $300 to $1,200, and we're getting people offering us lots all the time, and I can't even look at a good lot that, even down, I'm in South Carolina, it's like, and a dang lot's $2,500 to $3,500 a month. And the leases are getting egregious on the firms that hold them. And, you want to buy the property? Well, the property's gone up 6 times in value in the last 5 years. The insurance against it and all the different things. I think there's I had a conversation again at the show yesterday. Somebody goes, all right, tell me what my biggest threat is. And I looked at him and I said, you're paying all your salespeople $10.99 and they actually work for you. They're like, what? And I said, have you read any of the tax law stuff around how they're hunting in the landscape world and all that to do away with inappropriately tagging people $10.99 to avoid paying appropriate taxes on their income and having workers' comp and all those things? They will find the shed industry one day.
We're literally, we're switching over to no, and maybe not all parts of our business, because we do have that autonomy in some areas, but specifically with Shed Geek LLC, we're switching over to an S Corp and a payroll system and a
all
W2.
My salespeople are W2.
It's one thing that, in order to avoid some liability in the shed industry, it seems like, not everybody wants to go that route, but I don't know, I would almost encourage manufacturers to control that vertical through franchising your Facebook page, on your website, on your SEO, on all of your marketing areas, but also own your lots as best you can, or scale down. Instead of having 30 independent lots, why don't you own 10 of them? And when you lose a dealer, now you're not moving a whole bunch of sheds from one place to the next and trying to chase down a Facebook page
or have a central location to gather and bring your repos back and maximize your resale of your repos if you do your own rent to own. There's so many avenues that having at least some control are beneficial. It doesn't let you, these magnitudes of scale. If you've got unlimited building capacity, you've got some 18-wheelers where you can haul affordably long distances, you can add consignment dealers at a just mind-numbing pace. And then you can lock them into your software and help delineate your cost, and you can lock down your rent-to-own premium, so you're making a premium over the top of what you had to pay them, which almost reimburses you. There's ways you can make it work that'll give you scale, but you lose a lot of control. And then 2 and 3 years later, you've got, and that's what happened to several of these companies that went under. They woke up one day and they had 40 dealers scattered over 3 states. Most of the logistics weren't making sense and was way expensive. Their cost of their funding line went up, or their funding line evaporated. We all know the notorious story of a bank not to be named that all of a sudden shut down all of their rent-to-own funding, which then shut down everybody's inventory funding and affected a bunch of us, including me. And it had a hemorrhaging effect across the industry. And then all of a sudden, I've got a bunch of inventory sitting at places I can't afford to go get that's not being sold, or it's gone.
Digital Shed Builder is an online shed configurator that strives to provide incredible visual quality, fantastic customer service, and an amazingly low price point, making it a perfect fit for any shed dealer looking to increase their online sales. Digital Shed Builder is simple to use, taking less than 5 minutes to integrate on your site. The Get a Quote feature streamlines your sales process, showing you exactly what your potential customers need. They offer a highly customizable experience that accurately represents your brand and unique shed offerings, working with you directly to set up everything you need in a configurator. With no extra startup cost, no lengthy contracts or commitments, and no hidden fees, Digital Shed Builder has been created with quality, simplicity, and affordability in mind.
Which begs the question for me, if all of that banks to not be named, pulled all of this, who's taking care of those contracts? Who's satisfying those contracts? And I know there's somebody right now stabbing me with a little fake doll in the back saying shut up, but hey, who's funding your contracts?
Yeah, where'd it go?
If it's not private equity, then all of a sudden where's it going? And maybe that's just, hey, look, I'm not saying that's doing anything wrong, just to be clear. I'm saying last time I was here we talked about acquisitions. Is this a perfect example of acquisitions happening, whether it's in shed companies or even RTO companies or...
3 years ago, you sat in the RTO national offices and interviewed me, and I said one of our biggest concerns is that we are seeing the first intro salvos of private equity into the industry. Mm-hmm. And when big money with deeper pockets than all of us, including RTO National, started entering the field, I told you on the podcast, that's one of our biggest concerns because it will change the landscape at a mind-numbing pace.
Yeah.
Now you and I, if we chose to name names, can name 5 companies off the top of our heads that are all owned by private equity firms right now today or completely funded. And I've had several of the leaders in a couple of those companies that share with me privately going, oh my goodness, Richard, these people are completely different. They don't care about anything but the yield. He goes, I didn't understand I'd have to look at my business and start talking in terms of just raw yield. They don't care how many employees, they don't care how many sheds. What's the yield on my investment? And if it ain't double digits, I'm pulling all my money and firing everybody.
You want to talk about invitation to the real world? Whenever you tell me, stop being naive, because friendship don't matter. Wait until you find some sharks.
Oh, yeah. Go to work for a private equity firm and tell them that you want to do what's right.
I'm sorry.
That is not as negative as it sounds. You and I are laughing, and it's a good long story. I am not that negative, Nelly. I'm just going, to me, coming from a world where private equity was common and securitization was common in the auto space, that was the reason we were the way we were.
So let me ask you, are we wrong as an industry because probably our faith drives a lot of our decision? Are we wrong? Are we naive? Are we going to change? Should we change?
You already have.
Me or the industry?
The industry.
Okay.
You're still holding on. I applaud you for it.
A little.
I'm just going, and
I just believe
you and I had the conversation, and even
people,
on one of the cast, I'm a person of faith. I'm not probably as vocal about it as others. Because to me, it's a very personal thing.
Yeah.
But, and I can be judged.
It drives the business decisions of so many people.
I can be judged that. And again, I think some of them do, but I also think that some of the hypocrisy of some of the testimonials is just blindingly clear now. And it is causing people to question the motives. I think there are known situations, and I've experienced them myself, where people were demanding that I acquiesce to an agreement of a decision because they assigned a faith-based principle to their position that, in my opinion, wasn't supported, accurate, or true, and I don't even believe they believed it. They used it as a manipulation tool to get somebody to agree to something. And I think when you see that enough, that people start going, I will operate on my own grounds, for my own beliefs and principles, but I'm going to be hard-pressed to allow you to change or influence me based on yours because I have become skeptical of the purity of the position.
Man, that's a soundbite if I've ever heard one. I think I do because I want to believe in the goodness of people. And there's nothing wrong with that because I do believe that people, so many people are so good, and I owe so much to so many people. But I'm vocal about my faith. I say the show belongs to the Lord. The Shed Geek brand in any way, shape, or form, I give it to Him. And so I am vocal about it. But does it make me wrong when I make a decision that's best for the business or your family? Because what I find is that, like, we're getting into some weeds here a little bit now, but when your faith determines that you should make this decision and that I should also make this decision because of your faith, but then the impurity that you're talking about is whenever they are faced with the same opportunity and make a different decision, and you go, wait a minute.
That is the stuff of wars.
Yeah, wait a minute.
I mean, it is.
It's good enough for me, but it's not good enough for you.
Do you not think that the money lender story we all know so well, and right before Jesus flipped the table over on him as he entered the temple, that person wasn't protesting their own faith in an effort to get people to take money from him?
So I'm always careful to explain to
the
people.
question is, we don't question the righteousness of the decision at the time. You look back at it and you kind of go, but who got taking advantage of that person's location and selling money right outside the temple?
Mm-hmm.
Are you selling too close to the temple? Because you're selling.
Mm-hmm.
And you're selling for you and your family's benefit, which is not
Hello, Shed and Carport industry. I'm Cord Cook, Chief Brand Strategist here at Shed Geek Marketing. Did you know that Shed Geek Marketing works with 45 shed companies and counting? And we are not slowing down in 2025. One of the neat benefits to working with Shed Geek Marketing is working with an agency as opposed to just an individual. When you work with Shed Geek Marketing, you have a team of professionals working diligently to ensure your success. From branding guidelines and brand books to websites, Google and Meta tag tracking that measures the traffic to your website and social media pages, CRM setup and full automation build-outs, lead funnel integration, and so much more. Worried about whether or not we can serve you? Don't be. Shed Geek Marketing works with manufacturers ranging from $1 million a year in sales up to $80 million a year in sales. There is no manufacturer too big or too small. Remember, marketing is an investment that should be making you money. That's why nearly 50 companies have decided to work with Shed Geek Marketing. So for more information, go to www.shedgeek.com and submit some basic information, and we'll reach out with a discovery call and patiently walk you through how we can best serve you. Thank you for your time and look forward to working with you.
I'll go back and listen to this episode 4 times. I always enjoy sitting and talking with you because it's the look, where we start and where we arrive is a road that nobody's traveled. I can promise you that. But I love to follow these rabbit trails of thought. And I don't know, sometimes we probably get in a little trouble. Maybe we say a little too much or peek a little farther. But I believe in difficult conversations.
And you told
Richard.
me before, sometimes I think I say things that maybe people think, but they don't always say.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to do it to be I don't consider myself a harsh person or any of those things. I think I've just lived a life that forces me to try to live my own truth and try to stay as true to that as I can, because I've been around some of the biggest and best snakes in the world, and I've been around some of the most true, honest, helpful, good people in the world. And looking back, it wasn't easy to tell them apart sometimes. You know what I mean? And you kind of go, so then you just have to do the best you can. But I think it's a dangerous thing to apply. Don't go into it with closed eyes. Don't go into it with too much skepticism. But at the same thing, I'm wary whether all the old sayings come out and how you think about it. I believe in good people. I want to do the best, but I'm also not wanting to be naive. Right now, there's scams going on everywhere in every way. The Hurricane Helene victims, they're looking for people that have lost animals and calling to tell them they found their animal. I'm with the Humane Society. My elderly parents have been barraged with attempted scams. Just phone and mail and personal, and we got a family member, and you see these things and you go, you don't want to become that skeptic. There is still good in the world, but don't pretend that it doesn't sit in the shed business and sit in the world too.
This is becoming my favorite episode in some ways. Maybe because you do say things that sometimes people have difficulty saying, but are thinking. And I don't know. I just, even my own experience has been unique. I don't mean for this to sound sacrilegious at all, because it's not. I love the Lord and I love His people, but I knew what to expect from the world, especially before salvation. Okay, I knew what to expect, and I knew how to handle people, and I knew how to deal with people. It's only whenever I found salvation and became vulnerable and began to trust that I would make the argument that emotionally, spiritually, and financially, I have been taken advantage of by more professing, faith-based Christian folks, even pastors to you go on down the list, than I have by the world. And I know but that probably throws some people back who are listening right now, but that's also the reality of what I've experienced. Now, that does not mean that I've not found some amazing people in the church. some that I believe are good to their core. I do believe that. But I have suffered more from emotional, spiritual, and financial loss from those who are some of the loudest professing Christians than I have from the world.
So they can do the most damage. Yeah. They have the ability to do the most damage. You know, in the car business, you know, when I got into lending, there was actually a trained, you know, be careful when you saw an application of one of the 5 Ps. Painters, politicians, policemen, preachers, and prostitutes.
I thought preachers was going to be last on that. I didn't expect that.
But look at the group. Painters being the one weird one, but it was just because, you know, but all of them were influential in their own ways.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, you were trained as a lender if you saw anybody in those professions to really be wary of underwriting the loan.
That's interesting.
You know, and you're kind of going, it was such a commonality, and I found it just shocking, raised the way I was. They're going, you know, well, why would you do that? Well, then 20 years later, I'm like, oh yeah, I know now. Yeah. You know, it was kind of like, you had to be careful.
I'm not going to suggest it also hasn't changed me, but I've done my best to avoid it being, causing a jadedness towards my salvation or toward my Savior, right? Because I've done my best not to let it affect me in that way. But I've talked to so many people in this industry that the only reason I know I can let this episode air, and even though if I get some flack from it, it's going to be okay, is because I know the private conversations I've had with people who shared the exact same sentiment with me, and I bet there's no less than 50 of them who have told me and agree with the same thing. Man, you're right. I've probably been taken advantage of more by the closest friends and allies that I have.
Have any of us not ever looked at the sky and screamed, "Why have thou forsaken me?"
Yeah.
We all have our moment.
Yeah.
You know, what we do with it and what we come out as it is a different thing.
Yeah, how you react is everything.
You know, I think, and I don't want, you know, again, I don't want it to become a, like you said, you know, an episode that takes us down that path. I don't think either one of us, it's way more about just understanding, and when you put it in context to the shed business, we're still going through an evolution. There's different players in the market that have different motivations. I think on the last podcast I told the story of, you know, one of the dealers telling one of my new analytics people at RTO National, there's different people at the shed show than we've ever seen, and it was private equity people walking around. You know, capitalism doesn't have the same belief system.
Hello, today we're going to take a look at IFAB's component saw system. So we're utilizing a DeWalt chop saw. We've put it on sliders, easily to adjust. We've automated it using pneumatics so that we can run all these saws together using one actuator. We can either actuate with a 2-hand safety control here or a foot pedal. The 2-hand safety control comes with board clamps here, so to clamp in your board so you're totally hands-free. We've got digital readout up here to find your angle as well as your length. So we have a 90-degree saw here for your super long angle cuts. We've also got a conveyor on this system to take away your cutoffs. This system is completely modular. We can add as many saws as you need. The rails can be as long as you need.
For more information, visit www.ifabllc.com.
And I always found it interesting. I think it's unique that the industry was kind of based, and it was a faith-based industry, and that was a positive thing. And I think they're still good to that. I do think rent-to-own's been successful because of a lot of that. But if you think about the clientele that you're catering to, are they necessarily that? Yet they pay better on non-credit check rent-to-own for their sheds than they do for their car loans that have proof of residence, proof of income, proof of location, driver's license, IDs, and we sign them up. I always was just amazed when I got in the shed industry that people would pay for their sheds better with no asking any questions and just telling them you believe in them and you're doing the right thing. You know, but I still see though that there's a cost of rent to own, and half of the population that gets a shed are doing rent to own, and you go, well, if you just look at demographics in the United States, usually it should be less than 30% would be required to use rent to own without having a significantly cheaper alternative way to go get the building. Doesn't mean they're not going to borrow the money, but it would be significantly cheaper. So you kind of go, is rent-to-own being used or oversold? Or is the industry actually reaching out and catering to a bigger population of the unserved and unserviced, which is a benefit, when you go to your blue? There's all these things that come into it that you can question why it's different, but I think the length of time, now that we've got criminal fraud seeping in, how many lenders do you know right now that are doing soft identity checks and criminal backgrounds before they're funding their rent-to-own deals? I can name 5 large companies I know are doing it precisely because they don't trust or believe anymore because they can't. The losses are there. So you're seeing this infiltration and change not just in the dealer base, but you're seeing a change in the customer base. So, the world is crashing in, and now there's a demand of an ROI, and there's a demand of an investment, and there's a fixed yield, and, there's all these things that are happening that are going to force a change that will bring it back into the world.
I always give good food for thought. It's always like a super educational time sitting with you. And some of these topics may be things that people consider educational and entertaining and fun, and some of them may be like, no, this is just my life. I've experienced some of the same things, and I'm glad that you're talking about that in difficulty. I want to make sure I reiterate that I never, ever, ever, intend to offend. Yeah. But you risk being offensive the moment you speak in any setting. You risk it. And you risk offending being quiet. So you're never going to be able to satisfy everybody in every situation. And I think I've finally kind of come to that conclusion to where it's like, well, why don't you talk about those things? You may lose listeners. And it's like some listeners are worth losing if they're not willing to dig into difficult conversations like we are, as long as we can maintain respect and appreciation for people and make sure that you're moving the needle forward and you're not doing it for pure pleasure seeking or revenge or anything of that nature, then we should be having more difficult conversations from time to time. You just kind of bring that out of me. Typically, I stay on.
Yeah, it's like, why do you make me talk about all the things I
gotta have somebody to blame.
The child in the storybook, The Emperor's New Clothes, that screams he has no clothes on. And in the book version I had, it was a little girl. Is she a hero or a villain? It's just a matter of perspective. If you're the person that sold the emperor the clothes, she's a villain. If you're the crowd standing there that wanted to say what everybody knew was true and only the child did, she's a hero.
Well, it's usually the innocence of a child that'll break down that reality that, hey, he's clothless. You know what I mean? Like, we're stating the obvious, and in some situations it may not be a child. It's honestly just a genuinely honest person.
But in the business world, when you bring it full circle, and in the shed world, I think we have some circumstances out there that are common that are the emperor's new clothes. And we all know they exist. And we've catered and entertained them for a long time. And all of a sudden, there's more and more people whispering, we've got no clothes on. And I think it's going to change the nature of how some people make business decisions in the future. I think it'll change a little bit of the face of the industry, but I think for me, it's just that constant challenge to make sure I'm staying true to the just cold light of day of what does the information tell me, and am I making a sound decision based on what I can validate.
I remember when I got in, and others have probably heard the same thing, once you start learning about RTO, and it's like you ask questions and you try to figure things out, and it's like that's where the money's at. And that's why a lot of people jump into, just because so many people are saying that's where the money's at, they're saying, well, hey, we have a little invest, let's jump into it.
And I can tell you my manufacturing margin is greater than I think I could generate in an RTO yield right now. The table has changed.
Yeah.
Transportation still the leanest margin.
Do you think we'll see more manufacturers because of that, or do you still think we'll see acquisitions of larger companies swallowing
to do it more profitably? You've got to be bigger and you've got to have scale.
Have you ever considered like offering your services through an acquisition process?
Yes.
Are you open to that if people call?
Sure. I have.
Can I get a dollar bill off of that? Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
The greatest value we have is time to tell you that, as you well know, that was a loaded question. I know you know that. There are some people that do pay me for conversations regularly.
I got myself tickled. I'm sorry.
And there's some people I just have the conversations because I know them. There's a fairly good group of people that there's an exchange of information and services and ideas. And I think if you're privy to most of them because of your relationships with some of them and the fact you've introduced me to some of them. But it's a lot of the partners that I use in banks, buildings, and things today are people that I also share insight and information with. Raising money, raising capital, acquisition-based valuations. Even before my time in rent-to-own, we spent a lot of time doing those things. Mm-hmm. And it became common. I'll never forget when a client of mine at RTO National called, and he goes, "Can you come see me?" And we jumped in a plane and flew up, and he is out of the business entirely now. And he sold out, and he goes, "They're talking net ROIs and multiples, Richard. What do they mean?" And I will tell you, I still haven't seen a deal as lucrative as that one. But, and he looked at me and he goes, "I got a 10th grade education." And he goes, "I've been building sheds forever and I build good sheds." He had a great business. But the firm that hit him, he had to get some advice very quickly. And, or if you're acquiring.
Running a business can feel like trying to balance a dozen plates, except none of them are actually plates, and one of them's on fire. Enter Newfound Solutions. Think of us like your business BFF, always ready to lend a hand with whatever you need. Have you always wanted to start your own rent-to-own company but don't quite know where to start? RTO Partners is here to help. Overwhelmed by all the moving pieces in running your own rent-to-own program? RTO Smart is a software that encompasses everything you need on one platform. Or leave the rent-to-own up to us and focus on what's more important to you. Newfound Rentals has you covered with traditional rent-to-own options for your customers. Shed Connect understands the complexity of the digital marketplace. We take the hassle out of online sales. And unlock the full potential of your brand with Co-Creative. We'll make your brand look so good, your audience won't be able to look away. Newfound Solutions. 5 powerful sub-brands helping you succeed across every aspect of your business. Visit newfoundsolutions.com today and let us do the balancing so you don't have to.
I have very, just like everything we've talked about today, I have very strong opinions of how I think about it and go about it. You and I had a conversation off record earlier. How I evaluate software companies is very different than how I evaluate hard asset companies like manufacturing or transportation companies and things, because I just think that the general market looks at those very differently from a valuation standpoint. Software can be very intrinsically valuable, and it can trade at a multiple of its revenue beyond what a hard asset company can. Because it can be scaled by somebody that has the desire and willingness to do a lot of money. And it can be done quickly. And, whereas manufacturing requires more dirt, more land, more buildings, more materials, more humans. It can't be scaled as fast. So, you buy one of those for what it currently does and makes in its actuality, whereas other things you look at and buy towards their future potential. I think that's what's getting interesting is the conversations I'm having with people that I find incredibly interesting. How do I shape my company to maximize its future purchase price? So in the manufacturing sales world, the conversations I've been having is people getting replicable, clearly documented, simple processes that can be scaled in a manufacturing and retail environment. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And there are people right now currently working towards that. Their exit strategy, and again, it's interesting to talk to people in the shed business versus 2017, because I have people entering the business that are entering it with a 3 to 10 year exit strategy of monetizing what they've built, which is very common in other industries. It just hasn't been seen, from my experience, a bunch in the shed industry until the last few years. And they're going, how do I create and get the maximum value out of ABC shed manufacturer dealer? And I'm going, well, one, to our earlier point, if you own your locations instead of consignment dealers, you have more control, which makes it more understandable and purchasable at a value, because there's no guarantee a consignment dealer stays on and can enforce the contracts or even have agreement and contract. You know, is my process scalable? Do I have staff and process where I can open a new lot, ramp it up, and hire a person that executes at a relatively equivalent rate to all of my other locations quickly and do it repeatedly? Can my manufacturing process, as long as I have X number of square feet, be duplicated, replicated, or scaled to support growth?
When you increase in sales, I mean, that's often the challenge. You know, everyone prepares for failure. Have you ever thought about that? Like everybody says, you're supposed to have something to fall back on.
Yeah.
But so few people actually prepare for success. When it starts going good, I think a lot of times it scares them, because it's like, I never expected to really get here. I sort of anticipated the backlash or the shoe to drop, but I never expected. So now that I have success, so for instance, sales, that's going to drive your lumber costs down because you're buying in bulk, but do you have the value to do it through your cash flow? Is your operations set up to be able to handle the influx? A good example is we've gotten leads, and to me, sales is about, there's a lot of things sales is about, but generally speaking, you keep your pipeline full. Look, this is the best secret anyone could possibly ever come across. You keep your pipeline full, you're always going to be selling. You don't keep your pipeline full, you're relying on selling to everybody who walks in the door. It's not reality. You need 100 people in the pipeline. You know, you think whenever I go get a podcast, I haven't talked to 30 people so I can get 5 interviews.
Yeah.
You have to do that, because not all 30 people, but that doesn't mean the other 25 won't come later, over time.
Sure.
And they have.
Just a lot of times. A timing thing or a scale, or
but I've got to reach out to a larger crowd, so it's the same way. For that reason, I mean, I'm even entertaining the idea, if we can do it effectively, and I think I told you this before. What if we got involved in sales in some way? What if those leads that aren't being capitalized on could be? How much more beneficial would that be? And you can actually, because that's one of the biggest problems we have, is you can get someone 130 leads, look in their CRM, and they haven't followed up with 120 of them.
Well, it's the same thing. The number one complaint consumer survey in the shed industry is going to a lot, nobody's there. I can't get any information. The same thing is true of the online lead.
Yeah.
You know, here at Banks, I know a lot of our customers, you know, we get it in our reviews. I sent 5 inquiries to online ads and only 1 person answered me. Thank God for Chris at Banks Buildings, you know, and it was one of those, you know, and it's like, why?
Yeah.
It's not, you know, none of us are making so much money we have to stop and are so successful we can't do anymore. It's not true. There was a time that was true.
It's systems and processes.
Yeah, it's just understanding that, and I think finding people that have an expertise at it, but also the ability to scale it. I have, you know, again, BDMs, you know, BDCs. Car business uses that term all the time. Anybody in the car business, you got a BDC? What's that? It's a business development center. It's not a salesperson waiting on the next customer to come up front of the lot. It's people that are dedicated to interacting with the way that the majority of the customers are interacting with you first before they ever show up and attempt to buy a car. It is, I'm following up on social leads, I'm following up on emails, I'm following up on phone calls, I'm calling previous customers, I'm generating referrals, I'm doing all the hard work that makes it successful to fill that pipeline you just talked about and to keep it flowing. And then in the automobile business, they were even willing to then take that lead and hand it back to a salesperson. But then some of the biggest and best ones were like, yeah, but then they still don't do anything with it. You know, it's.
I come from a mindset of like the proof is in the pudding. If you get 100 leads and you say, you know, they weren't any good because we didn't close any of them. Is it that the leads aren't any good? Or is it that you're struggling in your sales situation.
Sure.
You hate to call someone out just straight like that, but you kind of want to say, again, the proof is in the pudding. What if I just acquire those 100 leads and then I sell myself? What if I take the same 100 leads, not being given the advantage of reaching out to them 5 minutes after the CRM showed up that it was a 3D configurator submission or an email submission or Google Ads or wherever they came from, and I've got to call them back and it's a week old lead? What if the same 100 that you close 0 on, I can close 10 sales out? Is there proof now that maybe it's not?
So you're saying you want to tell some people that their emperor has no clothes on?
Well,
that they didn't properly train their salespeople, hire qualified people, and have an accountability process for making sure that they're following up on customers.
We know that happens. We know.
It is the truth of the industry. It is human nature. It is the way it goes. But again, how you solve for it comes down to the willingness of the dealer owner to say,
not even how you
I would rather hire somebody as a third-party, unemotional person that I can hire and fire at will based on their success rate than I am willing to have the hard conversations with people that I brought in. And it's, my number 2 guy's cousin that just had a baby and they got here, and I'm not going to let them go because it's 2 weeks before December or Valentine's Day or Easter or 4th of July or whatever, and I'm going to let them limp along. When I've got a contract employee sitting out there in a call center with an anonymous face and you don't bring me 10% close rate, I'm going to fire you.
Yeah.
It's unemotional. If it works for me, it's a great solution.
Well, if you're willing to put yourself out there and be that center for somebody, that sales center for somebody. I don't know.
Now everybody's got to ask themselves, though, to our earlier conversation, you're going to make them more successful, sell more, make them more efficient, probably generate lower costs, but you're going to do it at a cost of their entire sales staff.
I think
that right?
That caveat, I like your question, but that caveat that there at the end, though, was like at the cost of their entire sales process. I think we can admit that there are some very engaged dealers that do an amazing job.
Sure.
Whether in consignment or wholesale. I mean, there's some guys that are selling, yesterday we talked to a guy selling $5 million a year. I mean, my goodness, you're getting it. I don't care who you are.
You don't
you're
touch
getting
them.
it.
And there's some of them are so ingrained in their community.
Yeah.
You won't sell autonomously as effectively as they are. What you will find, though, is you'll sell to different people than they do.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially newer generations that are choosing to shop the way that...
To me, the best strategy was always do both.
Yeah, of course. And that's what we preach. It's like that's the reason why I say the caveat. You don't have to replace your dealer network.
You will replace some because you'll get rid of underperformers and
Yeah.
things like that, and you'll find better ways, and you'll create more efficiency. And again, that goes back to that whole, you're asking, do people ask me about buy sales and consulting at time? I go, if you had 5 dealers, locations, and you open 5 more, and you prove that those new 5 could perform just like your existing 5 and they're all successful, and you could give somebody a written roadmap that says, and you could do 5 more every 12 months and continue to grow at this scale, you just created a multiple of value of your company. Mm-hmm. But when you sit down and go, you got no documented processes, you don't know how it, and only 3 of your people are really that successful. Again, it's that same math. We know it's true in most companies. If you have 100 dealers, their top 2 are standout. The next 9 are actually pretty good, but 80% of their sales are still coming from the top 10 or 12 out of the 100, and the rest of them you could do with or without, just based on whatever the circumstance is.
Hello, Shed Builders. I'd like to grab your attention for just a moment. As we look ahead to 2025, one thing is clear. Customers will have higher expectations than ever before. Shed consumers have an unprecedented access to information. To stay competitive, you need to create sheds that are not only high in quality, but also rich in innovation. You might recall my friend Dan Ream, one of my early podcast guests, who introduced Solar Blaster fans, specifically the Solar Roof Blaster. Dan has been busy handling orders, and he's eager to speak directly to shed builders about his groundbreaking products. What stands out to me about Dan's products, designed specifically for sheds, like the Solar Roof Blaster and the Solar Light Blaster, is how they enhance the shed owner's experience. With the focus on quality, it's time to start thinking about adding features and benefits for the end user. Here at Shed Geek, we wholeheartedly recommend Solar Blaster as the solution. My favorite thing about the entire line of products? The support you'll receive from Dan. Not only is he incredibly knowledgeable about these products, but he's also one of the most customer-focused individuals I know. He truly stands behind both his product and his service. We're searching for companies ready to elevate customer satisfaction to the next level. To learn more, just visit solarblasterfans.com and fill out some basic information for a callback, or connect directly at 480-747-7097. You can also check out the Shed Geek newsletter, where a click on the Solar Blaster ad will guide you to a form for more information and some cool videos showcasing the products. Let's power up innovation and elevate customer experiences together.
We should do this more. If you know, I've always told you, anytime you want to run a podcast, I got my hand in the air to be your first place.
Well, then I think there'd be some probably more controversial people than you and I coming on if I started doing it. Some of my friends would probably be but you and I have talked about it. I find it interesting. I would love to bring some people that I know are in the industry that maybe be outside the norm, that even are at a scale. An acquaintance of mine that runs one of the really, really, really big national companies, and you'd find him interesting to talk to in his perspectives. I mean, he has...
It's really all about content, Richard, whether you're in a magazine, whether you're doing a podcast, whether you're putting out something on YouTube, which coexists as a podcast anymore. It's really about content. I think the biggest thing for us is that we have a brand that we built. We start first and foremost with a trusted brand. So that the reason why, like I always say, trusted brands, because we're accountable. We're on here every week. If our audio doesn't match our video, something's wrong. If we're saying something different in the background than what we're talking about on the podcast, that's going to
be... Are you implying I'm your Joe Rogan?
No.
So, I mean, I'm the once a year you come interview the one guy that talks about all the stuff you hadn't been able to say all year.
You do allow a certain freedom in my speech, I have to admit. But I would say beyond being trustworthy and saying what we do, we have talked about the betterment of the industry as a whole. What we see as a betterment as a whole through the content that we generate. I mean, I encourage others to create content too.
Sure.
And you're constantly creating content one way or the other, whether it's on social media. We just happen to record it, but the reality is, I mean...
Printed is great. Emailed is great. I think you hold such a unique position. There is a voice to the industry. And I think that's a unique thing still. There's not a lot of voices to it. And like you said, even in the Plains community, so many that call in and listen to the recording via a phone line. That's a unique position. And, I'm still a big believer in Shed Geek, in the idea of, that same conversation in our very first podcast. I told somebody in a speech I was given, the saddest day in a community is when you see the last shed dealer close. Because I still am a big believer that a shed dealer represents hope. Somebody owns something of value, or they bought something of value, or they're trying to better their life or improve the quality. It's a container of hopes and dreams to me. And I think putting it out there and bettering the industry and challenging it to do more and evolve. Phil and I used to talk about it a lot, and about, the worst thing we could see is if the commercialized finance world came in and just took it entirely over, that it would lose that soul we were talking about, and that spirit. And it's not just the personal belief systems, it's the representation in a world of locally owned businesses that are invested in the community and the good of the community. A friend of both of ours, Matthew, I watched his videos where they were giving away the bicycles and the things, and you saw it, just shed video after shed video after shed video of dealers and manufacturers being in their community and contributing and giving back. And you see that in all kinds of industries, but I feel like this one has that soul and heart to it, and trying to make that sustainable. And I have been preaching this since 2017. It's the reason I was asked to come into this industry, was there are some of us that believe that it is an imminent threat. private equity will change it if it controls it.
Yeah.
And if it ever gains scale where we are no longer at a small scale price competitive, it'll price us out of business and we'll be the,
Well, we know that we could go aggressively get more private equity money as opposed to bank money to even grow and scale and become a major competitor in that space. I don't know that it's what any of us desire, at least over at Shed Geek. I don't know. We're still,
you may not be wrong
feeling
if you
our
hold
way
true
through
to
it,
your beliefs.
Well,
but I think that's what the Shed Geek has given a voice to, is open your mind to all the possibilities and make sure you're aware. Just be aware.
Education through entertainment. That was from day one, that was the thought, was to, and I've had people say, well, if you're involved in any industry, you're skewing the education. And I'm like, man, I couldn't disagree more. Literally everyone is invited. It would be different if I were skewing and saying this person doesn't get to play.
Well, and so many of the podcasts, and I think, you and I, what we were implying is, the people do stay just to their own true core story.
Yeah.
And those stories teach a lot. Hardship and success, failure, overcoming, personal, and it is education through entertainment. I think, though, every now and then you check yourself and go, there's a few of us that just have a global scale view.
Yeah.
And we get beyond talking about just our own small world. And I think that's where sometimes people sit back and go, we started out going, and I still find it interesting that people even care what I think. But I'm sitting here going, sometimes it's caused the willingness of just going, let's talk about it all.
Talk about it, yeah.
You know, we can stick to just what we do, and it's interesting within the
That's why we have
overlap,
such an array of guests. Sometimes people, especially people who tell me, I don't really have much to say. Oh, they have some of the best stories. And so it's not always talking about the levels of depthness of rent-to-own world and acquisitions and all these other things. Sometimes we're talking about how did you get started, what's your experience been, what advice can you give to help others along the way. Not everything has to be, you know what I mean?
Like a 12-step group. You want to hear somebody who's been in similar shoes to yours and how they manage. Good, bad, and indifferent. And it creates a commonality. And it gives us a shared interest and a shared passion, and it reinforces that, I'm not the only crazy one sitting here at midnight at night trying to do my QuickBooks. It's, my bane of existence. But, it's...
Deanna can identify.
Yeah, I got the nod from across the room. It's just, it is truly the bane of my existence right now. Of course, it's tax time, and I'm my own accountant, so that's even worse. But yeah, there's so many pieces to it. But I'll give you a plug. You don't ever stop or give up, because it has such a resonating. It's like anytime you call me and we're anywhere near each other, it's like we get back together and I enjoy the conversations. Sometimes I enjoy after it airs is the 15, 20 conversations I have the week after. And it's like, what are you doing? And it's like, but it really is a good time to see it, but it's always entertaining to listen to, how people see their world in comparison to yours, because that's what we all do. We look at it and go, how does it compare to mine? Am I alone? Am I together? Am I right? Am I wrong?
Well, assuming they want to call you and reach out for advice, or they want to pay you to do something. You want me to just give them my number? And I'll get them in contact with you?
Just tell them to call you and you can call me. I'm easy to find. I'm actually all over the place, apparently, on LinkedIn and Facebook, and our website at Banks Buildings actually rings to me. There's so many ways, but I do find it interesting, and I enjoy the conversations. After my last podcast, I hadn't even told you this. A gentleman called me from Maine. I had no idea. We'd never encountered each other. We're so far. And he goes, you said something, and I was just curious. Could I ask you, and would you be willing to share? And I'm like, well, I'm walking into something, but yeah, how about tomorrow at 10? And we talk for a really interesting conversation, because his geographic market was just so and I do know enough about it to know, he's got about a 5-month selling season.
Yeah.
It was just such a different thing, but, he was picking my brain specifically about some technology things and doing some online stuff and changing his sales. And he goes, I just wanted somebody to bounce the idea off of. And that's what I told you before we turned the recording on. I was glad you were here today because I've got an idea floating around in my head. And I was like, I'm not sure who I can bounce this off of that I feel good about getting their response.
To me, I heard this yesterday, and I've heard it previously, a ripple creates a wave. And there's so many waves that I do believe that's been created from people being willing to sit down and us just having the wherewithal to record it and put it out and be vulnerable. Be vulnerable more than anything, because this could have really blown up and been terrible. And I hope it hasn't been that for anybody. But generally speaking, we still collect the same amount of listeners. People still seem to be engaged. There's a certain amount of the shed world that don't want anything to do with it, and there's a certain amount that listen consistently without fail. And trust me, if we make a mistake, we know it. They tell us, and hey, keep telling us. We're fine with that. We want to be accountable. But if we misspell something or something, we know that they're watching or they noticed, or the calls that we get as well that say, I just really appreciate that you put that out there because that guy's story. Or that, and I think more conversation should happen. But I agree with all the conversation here today too. You have to be careful about how you walk with too much emotional front side on everything you do in business. And it's a lesson I've had to learn along the way too. And I'm thankful that guys like you call me out on it from time to time. I think it's a good thing. I've never looked back at it and been like, I'm upset because you sort of disciplined me in that area, in an area that as I look back and have grown, I needed that.
It's not wrong to have the emotion at the moment. It's the ability to set it aside before you make a final decision and make sure you're being rational. Because, the emotion can drive you to make a bad decision, even when you're staring at facts that scream something else. Or, pass on an opportunity or do those things. Man,
that's a deep thought. Even the facts that are obvious to you, yet you still go back to that comfort.
It's easy to do.
I don't want to be in a battle. I don't like the problems and things like that. But they're necessary for you to grow. Any final thoughts, just in general? We'll do more episodes. I'm always happy to have you on if you'll be on. But any just final thoughts for the industry?
I'm just waiting for the day you call me and go, I got more listeners to my podcast than Sam, so I can go to lunch with Sam.
He still has the most listened to episode.
Yeah, he's still getting me. I was like, man, when's that going to happen? I'm going to have to do something really provocative. We'll have to start doing teaser episodes of it. Hey, Richard's coming. He's going to say something really crazy. No. I think from my perspective, it's always great. We had a show here in Greenville, and it was good to see everybody. I do wish we could one day set the emotion aside and get back to, in the car business, there was an experience, and it's common in several industries. We called them 20 groups. And it's where dealer manufacturers from all over the country of similar size and age or experience, but not in competing markets, would get together and honestly and openly share everything from their detailed financials to their operation processes and procedures in an effort to make everybody in the group better. And you got hard feedback, and you got positive feedback, and you got reinforcement, but it was a place, and you met once a quarter. And in the car business, you paid a huge fee to be a member of some of the better groups because they brought a third-party arbiter in to manage the meeting, and they required you to do upfront work, but having done those for a number of years, we came away with so much knowledge and improvement and actionable things. When you have to sit down there and defend why you've slipped 10% year over year in sales and 30% of your locations and did nothing about it, and 20 of your peers or 19 of your peers are just looking at you, shaking their head, going, you know what the answer is, and they'll tell you. Over a number of meetings, you got to where you were so candid with each other that it wasn't emotional. It was truly giving that feedback. And then I found in one group that we managed for almost 5 years together with most of the same core members, you almost got to the point you were so desperate to get to the next meeting and go, I need to bounce this off everybody. What do you think? I want to do this. And it never failed. Somebody would go, I can help you with that. And, what if we do it at the same time and share the cost of it and, and do these things? And man, we would make huge leaps forward. And we weren't in competing markets. You know, I think if I had a thought, I think the Shed Geek is a pathway. And I know there's been some attempts, you know, the Shed U and some things that came through in different ways of trying to do some of that. And it's just struggled to come off the ground. We talked about hosting it at RTO National and doing it with just dealers of the company or not dealers of the company. You know, I know the MBSRA tries and does it, but, you know, it's a membership thing. You know, but I still think there's an open forum that has a lot of value for the people that care enough to want to participate. Because so many of the people call me, you know, it's not about me charging you anything. Most of the time I don't. It's about share something with me of equivalent value, and I'm good.
You excited to start something like this? We'll throw the Shed Geek stamp on it.
Yeah. We'll do the Shed Geek Consulting, or we'll do the Shed Geek Roundtable. We'll call it the Sheds of the Roundtable.
Well, we won't go wrong if you're involved. I know that. I appreciate your friendship. I certainly appreciate your business knowledge. You've helped me out tremendously, and I'm never, and certainly have never gotten too big to not acknowledge folks in this industry who have led the path for us to even have an opportunity to be here. Again, we just tried to be honest, be obedient to God, and then put a microphone to conversations that were already happening all over the place. Some of the best podcasts you'll ever experience will never be recorded, unfortunately.
Yep.
You got to involve yourself in networking and communication, and we've just kind of been given that path, and through that we've been blessed with these other opportunities that we've jumped into. But I have to steady myself every now and then and say, am I really the guy that wants to try to take over the world? Or, you know, can I find some level of contentment through that success of either financial success, influence, just being well thought by the community. I mean, sometimes that does a lot for your
there's something to be
ego,
said for
I guess.
saying I saw a lot of the world, and the parts that I saw would say they were better off when I left than before I arrived. If I could do that, I'm okay.
Yeah. I always enjoy it, man. It's always food for thought, and I will go back and listen to this episode. I hope you get a bunch of calls. I hope a bunch of people want your help.
Well, I hope I keep trying to make a successful business out of this.
I hope you don't get distracted by calls
Sometimes
either.
It's easier to have the answers than the actions, but no, it's been great. I enjoy meeting with you every time we do, and hopefully we'll do it again soon.
Yeah, well, I always look forward to it. Thanks for being on.
Hey, this is Mo Lunsford in sunny Union Grove, North Carolina, and we want to say thank you to all the guests and listeners.